What's going on, everybody? It's Michael Bones back for another Theory Thursday. Okay, this one's coming just a little bit late because I am actually working on more of the Circle of Fifths videos. However, each time I do more and more research, I find that it's actually more intricate and more beautiful than I even originally thought. So I'm excited to share that with you. However, it is taking more time. So for this week, though, I thought we were going to start to build kind of some of the peripherals, some of the knowledge that you might need to kind of fully absorb what I'm going to divulge in the Circle of Fifths video. So this is a bit more of like a beginner video, to be fair. But, stick around. Just follow along with me for now. And if you do have questions, just pop them down in the comments. I'd be happy to answer those for you. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is a few things. We're going to talk about intervals and then how to use intervals to make chords. What is an interval? Well, simply put, that's the space between like this finger and the next finger when you're playing two different notes. Depending on which your instrument is, it may be differently configured or vocally configured. However, when we look at the music stuff, we all read the same language. So let's take a look here. I'd like to show you a demonstration here of the cycle of notes. And again, we can have sharps or flats represented here as our inharmonic notes on the Circle of Fifths, as well as the scale degrees, the 12-tone scale degrees. In our 12-tone system here, we divide the octave, which is the same note, apart by one octave. And what an octave is simply put, we perceive the same sound, the same pitch, however higher or lower. So for example, if we use A440, that means the hertz of A4 on the piano, and that's what we tune to for violin and the orchestra, for example. Double that would be 880 hertz, which is also A. And you double it again would be the next A on the piano as well. Goes on infinitely up and down. Actually, Adam Neely had a really interesting video talk about how eventually when you pitch down to have those hertz slow enough, it actually stops becoming tone and becomes rhythm. It's quite interesting. If you want to learn more, I've linked that for you here. If we take a look here, you're going to notice a few things. Number one is that I've decided here to use sharps and not mix sharps and flats, just to make it a little bit easier to read. But again, it could be either C flat or B. We can kind of make choices here. However, I did want to make sure I'm representing all of the letter notes of our scale, so that's from A to G, and then it repeats back again to A. Okay, so coming in here, we have, if you have the same note, twice, that's an interval of a unison. That means that we have not moved up or down in pitch at all. And then from there we build up numbers based on how many notes we are moving. So for example, if we move here from our middle C to C sharp, that's the very next note. So this would be no more unison, which would be interval of 1. This would be an interval of 2, because we've now moved away from that original pitch. But the way that we call it is based on the scale degrees. So remember that there is not 12 scale degrees. There is, in fact, only 7 scale degrees. And then octave unison. Okay? So if we take a look here at a major scale, is a specific pattern of whole tone and semitones. And it is brought about in this specific pattern. So we have whole tone, semitone, whole tone, whole tone, whole tone, semitone. Okay, it doesn't matter which note you start on. This is the pattern of intervals for a major scale. And all scales will have this kind of relationship where the tone-semitone distribution will be the same for all scales. So really when you're learning your scales and arpeggios, if you learn it in one key, it's just more about comfort on your instrument where to play those. But otherwise, all scales are really the same, all arpeggios are the same. So good practice to do more than one, but moving forward here. So we have our intervals here, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. But you see there's 12 notes here. So for example, on our C major scale, we would not use any of the sharp notes. So these would be the notes we use. And here you can see that pattern that we discussed coming to light. We have a space between the first two notes, a space between the second two notes, and then no space or semitone between the next two notes. And then again, space, 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 no space. Okay, so this is how we call our scale degrees, and this is also how we call the degrees of the intervals. So from the first note to the second note would be a second. From the second, or for the first note to the third note would be a third. To the fourth note would be a fourth. From the first to the fifth would be a fifth, sixth, seventh. Okay, and then octave. Now you're going to notice here again we have some grayed out notes or notes that we're not using for this scale. Now if we fill those in, those would also be called either seconds, thirds, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or octaves as well. How it goes here in order, we're going to go from interval of unison, of both notes being the same, and then moving them slowly further apart, would be intervals of unison, minor second, major second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, tritone, perfect fifth, minor sixth, major sixth, minor seventh, major seventh, octave. This is going to be based on our starting note. So from this note to the next note, how much is the distance? Now sometimes you're going to find where we might go to like the third note of the scale above the octave, for example, a leap of a tenth. Okay, so that's a full octave, 8, and then we go 9, 10. So you can keep adding intervals 11, 12, 13, 14 all the way up, and they would still repeat the same pattern of major, minor, if they were within the same octave. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of information here about how intervals work, and when we stack the intervals together by skipping every other scale note, this is when we start to build chords and harmonies. If you take a look at your practice charts when you do your arpeggios, in fact we are playing the harmonies, although instead of playing them stacked and all at the same time like a chord on a piano or a guitar, we are playing one note at a time, breaking it up. Okay, it's great exercise for the fingers, but it's also, I want you to know a bit more about what it is, why it's important. Okay, because we're going to find these kind of patterns in our music all over the place. So what is the chord that's based on the first degree of our scale? Let's pick our C major scale again, just to make it nice and easy, nice and simple. I did try to say this is a beginner video, so I apologize if I'm moving too quickly, or if I'm actually not moving quick enough. Let me know. These videos are in fact for you. I'm happy to make them. I enjoy sharing my knowledge. I went to university for music. I've written for orchestra. I've got a great deal of knowledge here in the theory and composition realm. Okay, so if we build a chord on the first note here, it would be a 1 chord, or a major 1. We build on the second would be a second or minor second chord, and we'll talk about major minor in a moment here when it comes to chords. It is quite similar to the intervals. Let's just go through the chords here first. Third would be third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, diminished 7. I have not had my coffee yet. I have it right here. So when we build these chords, we're going to just simply use these notes of the scale. Now let's take the 1 chord here, for example, to start. C, E, G. You're going to note here that how many intervals or spaces between the notes there are between the notes is different from the first note to the second note and from the second note to the third note. Okay, you'll see there's actually one less semitone between the third and fifth than there is from the 1 to 5. Sorry, the 1 to 3. Okay, now if this discrepancy of the interval spacing was reversed, where the 1 to 3 was the smaller and 3 to 5 was the larger, then we've changed major to minor. Okay, it's a very subtle change. All we do is move the middle note of the chord down 1 semitone from major to minor is how we make that change. Okay, when it comes to the quality of chords, this is how we look at them here. So major would be 1, 3, 5, and then if we flatten the third of the chord, we would get, from the major scale, we would get the minor chord, C, E flat, G. Alright, so if we then decide to change the 5th note and lower that by a semitone as well, we go from a minor chord to a diminished chord, and like the 7th in the major scale. Now this is a bit more of an interesting chord. It's got quite a unique sound, and when you're first starting out, I would just simply avoid it. It's got a lot of unique qualities that are very helpful to composing and soloing and all that, but take it step at a time. That'll be in more advanced videos. Alright, so if we move the other way and have a major chord, and then we've already have the higher third, if we higher the 5th by a semitone, it becomes augmented, which is kind of like the opposite of the diminished. Those are kind of the more advanced ones, so we won't worry about those today. Okay, we can build our major chord, we can build our minor chord, and we've noted the difference here between the intervals spacing between. I just want to point out, because I find it quite beautiful here, that you can see here, we talked about diminished chords. So diminished chord is actually stacking minor thirds on top of each other. And we can also stack on top of our 1, 3, 5, the next one, 7. When we do that here for diminished chords, look what we see here. We get a perfect square across the circle of fifths. Now that means no matter which of these 4 notes we start on, it's the same chord. There's no inversions for this chord, so it's quite unique. And if I turn that square, you're going to notice here there's only 3 different combinations of this square that can possibly happen across our 12 notes. So no matter which key you're in, there's only 3 diminished 7th chords. So these are often used by composers and songwriters, for example, when they want to move from one key to another and they're kind of stuck on how to do it. Of course, you can do the Chopin method and just go right to the next chord. Who cares about the rules? But some use a diminished 7th like a pivot, a chord that could amorphously be in both keys at once. It kind of makes the transition a bit more interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the visuals I put together here for this presentation. If you have any ideas for what you'd like to learn next, or have any questions for me, please again write me below. I'd be happy to answer those for you. And until next time, stay cool, my babies! Ah!